Clara Jensen didn't mean to write a love confession in the middle of the night, but loneliness has a habit of knocking at strange hours. And that night, under the dim light of her tiny flat above her late mother's worn-out flower shop, Clara typed something she had buried for years. A short message, just a few lines, sent to a number she believed belonged to James Carter, the boy she had silently adored back in high school, someone she never had the courage to speak her feelings to. She didn't want a reply. She just wanted release, a quiet act of vulnerability in a moment of softness. But one wrong digit changed everything. The message didn't reach James. Instead, it landed in the inbox of Elias Ward, 35, a renowned but reclusive architect nicknamed the Ghost of Design for his near-complete absence from media and his solitary life in a glass penthouse atop one of Edinburgh's tallest towers. When Elias opened his phone at 2:41 a.m., he expected nothing more than a calendar reminder or a late work email. But what he saw made him stop. No spam, no promotion, just a confession, honest, quiet, aching in a way that made something in his chest tighten. He knew it wasn't meant for him, but he couldn't stop himself from reading it again. What stopped Elias wasn't the content of the message. It was how it made him feel. For years, he had lived in curated silence, where every conversation had a purpose. Every meeting was about contracts, blueprints, deadlines. His name, Elias Ward, was attached to buildings and awards, not feelings. But the brief message from a stranger carried something no one had given him in years: emotion without expectation. You probably don't remember me, but I once loved you. No question, no demand, no wait. Just a quiet memory that had never been spoken aloud, like a dream slipping through time, all on its own. Elias sat still. The screen remained lit, the words glowing faintly in the dark, like they were holding him. He almost deleted it, almost set the phone back on the table and returned to the unfinished model on his desk. But instead, he laid the phone on his thigh, leaned back in his chair. Part of him waited for the feeling to pass. Another part didn't want it to. And then, like a man stepping into the edge of the sea just to see how deep it goes, he replied, "I don't think this message was meant for me, but thank you for writing it." He didn't expect an answer. No one sends the wrong message and then chats with the stranger who received it. But he didn't turn off the phone either. Instead, Elias placed it quietly beside him and turned back to his unfinished design, while something in his chest quietly began building something else entirely. Clara didn't realize she had sent the message until the next morning. As she picked up her phone in the pale sunlight filtering through the curtains, her eyes still stinging from a restless sleep, a text from an unknown number was waiting. "I don't think this message was meant for me, but thank you for writing it." She shot upright. A chorus of "No, no, no" echoed in her head like a fire alarm. She read it again and again. Her hand covered her mouth, heart pounding wildly. Part of her wanted to throw the phone across the room, but another part felt strangely at peace. Because he wasn't mocking her, wasn't crude, wasn't dismissive, just kind. After nearly 10 minutes of pacing her tiny apartment, Clara typed back, "You're right, it wasn't, but thank you for not laughing." She didn't expect him to reply again, but just a few hours later, while she was arranging lilies at the shop, her phone buzzed. "I couldn't laugh, you wrote something real." And that's how it began. They didn't exchange names, didn't ask what the other did for a living, just late-night messages shared in the quiet, when the world went still and people became their most honest selves. She told him about the flower shop, how the smell of soil in the morning made her feel close to her mother, about how she often felt invisible in a city too loud to notice. Elias never mentioned buildings or fame. Instead, he sent verses of old poems he loved in school, photos of sunsets from his rooftop, the place he sat alone after meetings full of cold smiles and empty words. They didn't ask each other for too much, didn't press for answers not ready to be given. But something had begun to grow, like a tiny green shoot breaking through the cracks of two far-apart sidewalks. One night, as Clara watched rain tapping softly against her window, she said, Isn't it strange how words alone can make you feel close to someone, even if you don't know who they are? A minute later, Elias replied, "Maybe words are who we really are. Everything else just hides us." Clara found herself looking forward to his messages every night. She didn't know his age, where he lived, or even his real name, but she knew he wrote in a way that made her heart quieter. He read her words, not just skimmed, but saw them. Once, she sent him a photo, her dirt-covered hands holding a small lavender plant. No face, no body, just hands and bloom. Elias replied, "Those are the hands of someone who heals." Clara smiled for the first time in days. She didn't know where this was going, but she knew that, at least in these messages, she no longer felt invisible. The suggestion to meet didn't come as an invitation. It arrived in a text at 1 a.m. after a long and quiet day. "I want to see you." Clara read it over and over, her hand still holding a cup of untouched tea. She knew this moment would come. Part of her had waited for it. But seeing those words made her heart pound like it did before a school recital. "What do you mean?" she typed back. "In person, just once." She stared at the screen. Everything spun. They hadn't exchanged real names, hadn't heard each other's voices. Their entire bond had lived in the safety of text, just words, no images, no pressure. Meeting would tear that safety down. Clara typed, "What if I'm not who you imagine me to be?" A pause, then the 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then reappeared. Finally, he replied, "I'm not who people think I am either. Maybe with each other, we're more real than we've ever been." She took a deep breath. "Okay, but somewhere public, and just coffee." The next morning, Clara stood in front of the mirror in her soft blue dress, the one her mother used to call her sunlight armor. It flowed lightly, embroidered with tiny daisies. She paired it with white sneakers, not for style, but because they felt like her. Elias stood before his closet longer than for any board meeting. White shirt, too formal. Gray suit, too cold. He settled on dark jeans and a soft gray sweater. Simple, quiet. Not what the magazines would expect from Elias Ward. They met at a quiet cafe tucked under the trees near Inverleith Park, a place Clara often escaped to. Elias had passed it hundreds of times, never noticing. Clara arrived first. She sat by the window. Each time the doorbell rang, her heart jumped. And then he walked in, not like she imagined, not handsome in a movie star way, but with a kind of stillness that pulled everything else into focus. Deep eyes, hair slightly tousled, like it always resisted being perfect. When his gaze met hers, the room seemed to exhale. He recognized her instantly, the cautious hope in her eyes, the nervous smile. And she recognized him too, not by face, but by the way he looked at her, like he'd already read everything she'd ever written. They stood for a moment. Then Elias stepped forward. "Hi." Clara smiled. "Hi." They sat, 2 strangers with 1,000 shared secrets. The conversation started gently. Favorite films, music, childhood snacks. No talk of careers. No questions about background. Just easy layers being unwrapped, slowly. Elias said he worked in architecture. "Mostly boring stuff," he grinned. Clara didn't dig deeper. She hadn't come for titles. She told him about the flower shop, about living above it, waking to the scent of soil and stems. "Some days," she said, "I miss my mom so much it aches, but the garden makes me feel like she's still here." He listened, really listened, then said something that made her blink back tears. "People like you are the reason cities like this don't go cold." She couldn't answer. She just smiled and looked away, but something inside her had quietly begun to bloom. And as they walked out of the coffee shop that afternoon, they probably both knew what they had just started was more than just a conversation. It was something that could change everything. They started seeing each other more often. Not scheduled, not planned, just quiet visits. A coffee cup handed off in the afternoon. a surprise lunch in a warm paper bag, a pause in the day to say, "I just wanted to see you." Clara never thought she'd open up so quickly, but with Elias, everything felt different. He didn't rush. He didn't barge into her life. He arrived gently, like sunlight after rain. Elias didn't talk much about his work, but once, while she was arranging lavender, Clara asked, "What do you actually do in architecture?" He smiled. "I draw the places people want to call home, but I've never really found one of my own." She didn't answer, but her gaze, soft, accepting, was a reply he didn't know he needed. One afternoon, while they sat on the flower shop steps, Elias pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. His apartment, a glass penthouse overlooking the Edinburgh skyline. "Before I met you, I never turned off the light in my office, as if it stayed on, I had an excuse not to think about anything else." Clara looked at him for a long time. "And now?" she asked. He didn't answer right away, but that night he sent her another photo. The same room, dark, with just a single candle lit. "No, I turned the lights off so I can see a different kind of light." But beautiful things are often the easiest to notice, and just as their love began to take root, the world began to take notice too. One evening, after dinner, Elias walked Clara home. They stopped in front of the shop. He smiled, bent slightly, and handed her a single white tulip. Simple, quiet, thoughtful, but from across the street, a camera clicked. The next morning, Clara woke up to 23 messages, 14 missed calls, and her name beside Elias Ward's on a major headline. Elusive architect Elias Ward spotted with mystery woman, who's melting the ghost of design. Paparazzi camped outside the flower shop. An old photo from Clara's university days surfaced. Blurry, messy hair, unsmiling. The blog spun stories. Clara Jensen, wild past. Unknown girl softens Edinburgh's coldest man? Girlfriend or gold digger? Clara said nothing. She didn't need to. But inside, something cracked. A belief that love could remain untouched if kept quiet enough. Elias came to the shop that day. He saw it in her eyes. Not anger, not blame, just exhaustion. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "You shouldn't have to go through this because of me." Clara set down the flowers, wiping her hands on her apron. "I knew this would come eventually. I just didn't think it would come this fast." That night, they sat together on the rooftop of Elias's apartment. No words, just the wind in her hair, a sky with no stars. "I don't want to lose you," Elias finally said. Clara stared ahead. "The problem isn't you, it's your world." He turned toward her, steady. "Then let me learn to live in yours." And in that moment, Clara realized he wasn't just a man with money and mystery. He was someone willing to walk barefoot into the soft, quiet world she called home. But promises, no matter how tender, couldn't stop the storm the media was spinning around them. 3 days after the photo, Clara could no longer step outside the shop without being surrounded by cameras and questions. They called her name like they owned it, like they were entitled to her story. "Clara, are you really dating Elias Ward? Are you using this relationship for fame? Do you even know his past?" She didn't respond. Not because she was fragile, but because something inside her was beginning to tire in a way that ran deep. That evening, she closed the shop early, turned off the lights, and sat alone in the back kitchen. No flowers, no scent of earth, just silence and a cup of tea gone cold. She opened her phone and saw Elias's name on the screen. Part of her wanted to hear his voice. Another part wanted silence. In the end, she typed, "I need time to think." Elias replied almost immediately, "I understand. I'll be here when you're ready." The next day, no paparazzi, no flowers. Just Clara sitting in the middle of the shop staring at her hands. She had once believed that if love was kept quiet enough, it would be safe. But silence didn't protect a heart once it was dragged into the light. She remembered the first messages, when they didn't know each other, when everything was words and distance, when no one questioned who she was or if she was worthy. She remembered feeling seen, not through eyes, but through words. And now, when people looked at her, they didn't see a person. They saw a headline, a rumor, something to dissect. Elias came 3 days later, unannounced. No flowers, no coffee, just him, standing outside, hands in his coat pockets, waiting for her to open the door. When she stepped out, they stood still. No hug, no greeting. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Only if you are," he said. She nodded, but didn't smile. They walked inside. Everything looked the same, except the weight in the air. Clara sat down, hands clasped. "I don't know if I can live in your world," she said quietly. Elias didn't rush to reply. He sat across from her, his gaze steady. "I don't need you to live in my world. I just want to be part of yours." She looked up, for the first time in days, directly at him. "I'm scared." He nodded. "So am I." And that was what they had never said aloud before. The fear wasn't from a lack of love, but from never having loved someone in such a loud world. The next day, Clara didn't open the shop. She spent the morning in the back room, surrounded by thirsty plants and unwrapped orders. Time moved differently. But that afternoon, when golden light tilted across the wood floor, she picked up her phone and opened one of Elias's old messages. A simple one, nothing grand. "I think everyone just wants to be seen, really seen, at least once in their life." Clara didn't reply. She stood, untied her apron, and stepped outside. Not to run, but to keep moving forward. Clara thought the worst was over, that after the initial noise, the world would quiet again. But that morning, a beige envelope sat on the counter. No return address, no name, just one handwritten line across the front. For Clara Jensen. She picked it up, heart tightening with something unspoken. Inside was a folded piece of paper, the handwriting sharp and clean. "If you think you can run from the past, you're wrong. Some things don't stay buried. Tomorrow." No name, no hint, just a message and a date. Tomorrow. Clara read it again and again, not because she didn't understand, but because she didn't want to. Her hands clutched the note until her knuckles went white. Not from fear, from recognition. Someone knew, someone remembered, and the memories she had buried for 10 years clawed their way back. When Clara was 17, there had been a boy named Reed. Not a boyfriend, not a love, just two broken souls who met in the dark. Reed was a storm in a hoodie, reckless, magnetic, dangerous in a way that made a grieving girl feel alive. They had yelled from rooftops, skipped school, snuck into abandoned buildings, whispered heavy secrets that daylight couldn't carry. Then one night, it went too far. A fight, shouting, glass breaking, a store window shattered. Police arrived, and Clara ran. She wasn't caught. No one came after her. Reed vanished. And the whole thing dissolved like a nightmare she buried beneath years of gentle petals and silent days. But now, someone had turned that page, and Clara knew tomorrow wasn't a threat. It was an appointment. The next day, the sky was heavy, the wind holding its breath. Clara opened the shop like usual, arranged the succulents, pretended to be busy, but her eyes kept drifting to the clock. Then the bell above the door chimed. She turned, and her breath caught. Standing there, older, sharper, but unmistakably him, was Reed. "Long time," he said, hands in his pockets. "This place suits you. Flowers make you look softer." Clara didn't respond, just stared. Reed tilted his head. "I'm not here to stir anything up." "Then why the letter?" she asked, voice hoarse. He shrugged, but underneath there was weariness. "I didn't know how else to make you see me again." Elias was behind the counter, entering from the back with coffee and a paper bag. He stopped mid-step. His eyes landed on Reed, his body tensed. Clara saw him and gave a small shake of her head. Don't. Elias paused, didn't approach, but he didn't take his eyes off her. Reed looked down, voice roughened. I wanted to say sorry, not for that night, but for letting you carry it alone. I left, you ran, but I was the one who disappeared. Clara didn't know what to say. 100 memories surged, but nothing felt right anymore. Finally, she nodded. I forgave you, a long time ago. Reed breathed out like he'd been holding it for years. His eyes shimmered. You turned out okay. She smiled, soft, still figuring it out. He nodded, stepped back. No drama, no noise, just a door closing. For good. That night, Clara told Elias everything, every piece, no hiding. They sat on his rooftop, legs swinging over the edge. He reached for her hand, didn't say a word, just held on. And for the first time in years, Clara believed she wasn't alone anymore. Clara thought things were finally settling down, until one morning a strange envelope appeared on the shop counter. No sender, no return address, just one line written neatly, for Clara Jensen. Inside was a handwritten note. If you think you can run from the past, you're wrong. Some things don't stay buried. Tomorrow. No name, no signature, just a warning and a date. Clara stood still, fingers tightening on the paper. Someone knew, and she knew exactly what was coming back. When she was 17, Clara had been close with someone named Reed. Not love, not dating, just two lost souls crashing together in the dark. Reed made her feel alive, even when that meant danger. One night, things got out of control. A fight, glass breaking, a store window shattered. Herbal police, and Clara ran. She never told anyone. Reed disappeared. The memory was buried deep beneath petals and quiet years, until today. The next day, the bell above the shop door rang. Clara turned, and there he was, Reed. Hair shorter, jacket worn, eyes dimmer. Been a while, he said. She said nothing. I'm not here to stir anything up, he added. I came to say I'm sorry. I left. You had to carry it alone. Clara swallowed hard. Memories rushed in, but she said simply, I forgave you. A long time ago. Reed's shoulders dropped. You look okay now. She gave a soft smile. Still learning how to be. He nodded, turned, left. No drama, no noise, just a door closing on what once was. That night, Clara told Elias everything. They sat on his rooftop. She spoke. He listened, and then he reached for her hand. No promises, no pressure, just a quiet hold. Firm, warm. And in that stillness, Clara finally believed. She was no longer alone. And when Elias gently tightened his hand around hers in that quiet night, Clara didn't need promises. She just needed the truth. Someone stayed when the past came knocking. The next day, Elias returned to the flower shop with a paper bag of pastries and 2 cups of herbal tea. He didn't say much, just set them on the counter and offered her a small smile. Clara said nothing either, but her eyes looked clearer, like something heavy had finally washed away. Are you okay? He asked softly. Clara nodded. Not fully, but I'm trying. Elias didn't say more. He simply picked up a pair of shears and began helping her trim stems, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. From that day on, they found their way back to each other, not with declarations or labels, but with quiet understanding. They didn't need to say, we're back. Their eyes already knew. They never really left. But peace rarely lingers, not in Elias's world, where every movement was public property. Just days after their reconnection, someone from his past appeared. Vivienne Arlo, a famous fashion designer, and his ex-girlfriend from the days when both were headline material. Vivienne didn't want Elias back, but she refused to be replaced, especially not by a girl with no pedigree, no fame, and a shop that smelled like earth instead of money. That afternoon, Clara was watering violets near the window when a woman walked in. White coat, oversized sunglasses, perfume like power. Can I help you? Clara asked, keeping her voice even. The woman removed her shades. Her eyes were sharp and unblinking. "I'm not here to buy flowers. I'm here to give you a warning." Claire's grip on the hose tightened. "Excuse me?" Vivienne tilted her head, smiling thinly. "Elias doesn't belong in your world, and you don't belong in his. This, whatever this is, it's just a lapse in judgment. Don't let it leave a scar." Clara didn't flinch. She straightened up, calm. "If you came here to scare me, you might want to try someone else. I've faced far worse than you." Vivienne hesitated. Then, regaining her composure, she slid her sunglasses back on. "People like me don't threaten. We just tell truths. And the truth, Clara, is that Elias was never meant to live in a dusty flower shop." Clara didn't respond. She watched as Vivienne walked away, heels tapping like a countdown. That evening, Elias found out before Clara could even tell him. His assistant had called. Vivienne was teasing a post online about a man who once had everything making the wrong choice. He rushed to the flower shop. The door was still unlocked. Clara was wiping down the counter, hands slightly shaking, but face composed. "I'm sorry," Elias said. "He doesn't represent my life anymore. I choose you, no matter what anyone says." Clara turned, meeting his gaze. "She didn't scare me. But she reminded me of something I keep asking myself. Am I strong enough to stand beside you?" Elias stepped closer, slowly. "If you're scared, I am too. The difference is, I've chosen to stay scared and stay with you anyway." And in that warm yellow light, amid buckets of lilies and eucalyptus, Clara knew the storms would come again, but this time, she wouldn't be standing alone. Just when things began to settle, another wave hit, this time from Elias's company. An anonymous article surfaced featuring old photos of Clara from her university days. Messy hair, wild eyes, standing near a protest crowd. Nothing criminal, but enough to raise eyebrows. The headline cut deep. Elias Ward's girlfriend linked to violent demonstrations? The board immediately summoned Elias for a reputation review. When he stepped out of the conference room, Clara was already waiting in the lobby. She didn't speak, just handed him a folder. "May need to see this." Inside was a full report, the source of the post, the exact timing of the photo leak, and most importantly, proof that Vivienne's assistant had paid to publish it. Elias stared at her. "You looked into this?" She nodded. "I won't let them lie about me. And I won't let anyone hurt you either." The vote day arrived. Rumors swirled. Elias might lose his leadership. But when the board met, Clara walked in last. She placed the file on the table, voice steady but soft. "I don't need your approval, but Elias deserves the truth. And the truth is, I didn't ruin him. I protected him from someone who only knew how to manipulate." A board member flipped through the pages, then gave a nod. One nod that changed everything. After that meeting, the media's tone changed. Clara Jensen, the woman who saved CEO Elias Ward from scandal. Not a mystery girl, but a woman who stood up for the truth. Clara gave no interviews. She didn't post thank you notes. She simply returned to her flower shop, opened the windows, and wiped down the neglected pots. Elias came that afternoon, no suit, no luxury car, just Elias, with 2 coffees and an old book. He sat in his usual corner, reading while Clara trimmed tulips. No one mentioned the board, the press, or Vivienne. They didn't need to. The world outside was still noisy, but among the flowers, peace remained. One morning, Elias showed up earlier than usual. Clara was still in pajamas, her hair tied up messily, holding a mug of tea. "Why are you here so early?" she asked. He held up 2 plane tickets. "Because we need to go back to where it all started." 3 days later, they arrived in a quiet coastal village, one Clara had visited with her mother as a child. The sea breeze was soft, the nights were silent, and no one knew who they were. They walked barefoot on the sand, holding hands like 2 people who'd never lived under spotlights. That night, beneath a sky full of stars, Elias pulled a folded paper from his pocket, the the very first message Clara had sent by mistake. Worn, crumpled, but still intact. I printed it. I couldn't delete it. Clara's breath caught. Then Elias knelt. No flash. No spectacle. I don't need anything grand, just you. You're home. She laughed through tears. Then I'm home. 6 months later, they were married in the garden behind the flower shop, the place where everything had once begun, with a single white tulip and a quiet hello. No photographers, no grand announcements, just a few close friends, a few family members, and an afternoon filled with golden light. Clara wore a simple white dress, daisies in her hair. Elias wore no tie. They stood beneath strings of warm lights and flowers Clara arranged herself, smiling like the world had finally quieted just long enough to hear their story. As people danced beneath the stars, Clara looked at Elias and whispered, "What if I'd never sent that message by mistake?" He smiled. "Then I might never have found you. Or worse, I might have forgotten I needed to." Among the guests, someone cried, not out of sadness, but from remembering. Sometimes, the most beautiful things begin with a mistake. A message sent to no one. A man who forgot how to feel. A girl who thought she'd live quietly forever. And then fate didn't knock. It sent a message. Wrong number. Right heart.